Hey, welcome to my channel. Today I am going to explain a survival movie based on true story from 2025 titled Last Breath. So let's jump into the main video. The movie starts with some text on the screen. It says that there are 20,000 miles of pipeline under the oceans around the world. These pipelines are looked after by special workers called saturation divers. They go deep underwater, up to 1,000 feet below the surface to do their job. It's very risky and is known as one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. After that, we see a video of a man who has passed out at the bottom of an underwater work area. In Aberdeenshire, Scotland, a man named Chris Lemons is spending time with his fiancée, Morag. Chris is getting ready to leave for a new work trip where he will be diving in the North Sea. Morag understands that his job is dangerous and she feels worried about him, but Chris tries to comfort her and says that the job is actually pretty cool. Chris goes to the harbor to meet his diving team. He will be working this time with his old friend Duncan Alcock and a skilled diver named Dave Uwasa. When Chris first meets Dave doesn't seem very friendly and acts a little cold. The three of them get inside a diving bell, which is a small metal room that takes them deep underwater. While they are in the bell, Duncan shares some big news. He tells Chris and Dave that the company is making him retire after working for 20 years, so this diving trip will be the last one of his career. The team is out at sea and their ship is sailing right into a strong storm. Chris and Dave leave the diving bell to start their work deep underwater. Duncan stays inside the bell to watch their progress and take care of the cords that give them air, let them talk to the ship, and provide power. As the storm gets worse, a machine called the dynamic position system, which keeps the ship in place, stops working. Because of this, the ship begins to move and turn. Chris and Dave realize they need to get back to the bell quickly. Dave climbs over a piece of equipment called the manifold and makes it closer to safety. But then he sees that Chris's cord, the one that connects him to the ship, is about to break. Dave warns Chris and tells him to switch to his backup air tank, called a bailout supply. This gives him only 10 minutes of oxygen. Dave also tells Chris to try to climb up to the top of the manifold so that he can come find him. Just then, Chris's cord breaks and he gets separated from Dave in the deep ocean. The ship is still without power, and they are in a dangerous situation. Captain Andre Jensen is trying to figure out what to do. He needs to find a way to save Chris, who is lost underwater, and also make sure the ship's anchor doesn't break a pipeline. If the anchor hits the pipeline, it could cause a serious environmental disaster. Even though the storm is pushing the ship and they might be moving far away from where Chris is, Jensen acts quickly. He tells the crew to control the ship by hand so it doesn't drift too far. At the same time, another crew member works on trying to fix the broken positioning system by restarting it in a different way. Chris is trying hard to climb up the manifold, but it's very difficult. He can't see clearly underwater, and his oxygen is running out fast. As he struggles, he thinks about Morag, his fiancée. She had been sending him video messages to cheer him up and keep him strong. These memories give Chris a little hope, but soon his oxygen runs out completely. He starts to feel very weak and begins to lose consciousness under the water. One of the crew members uses an underwater robot called an ROV to look for Chris. They finally see him. He's still alive, but it's clear he's not getting enough oxygen and is in bad shape. The crew tries to rescue him with the ROV, but Chris had tied himself to the manifold so that the strong ocean currents wouldn't carry him away. This makes it harder to get him out quickly. While this is happening, Duncan talks to Dave and shares a sad story from a past job. He once had to help recover the bodies of people who died in a sunken ship. He remembers how one of the victims' wives was given only a small box with a few personal items to remember her husband. Duncan says he doesn't want the same thing to happen to Chris. He doesn't want Morag to get just a box. He wants to make sure Chris comes back alive. The ship's positioning system finally starts working again. This brings power back to the ship and makes it safe for Dave to leave the diving bell and go back underwater to rescue Chris. Dave finds Chris and brings him back to the bell. But there's a big problem. Chris has been without oxygen for almost 30 minutes. That's a very long time, and it's not clear if he can survive. Duncan tries to bring Chris back to life. At first, he's worried that it's too late, but then Chris suddenly speaks. Duncan quickly tells the rest of the crew that Chris is alive and talking. Everyone on the ship cheers with joy and relief. Chris is placed in a special room called a saturation chamber. He has to stay there for 3 days so his body can slowly adjust back to normal after being deep underwater. Because of what happened, the diving job is canceled, and the team stops working. Duncan and Dave stay close to Chris during his recovery, watching over him and making sure he is okay. After 3 days, Chris says goodbye to them as he leaves the chamber. Before the team goes their separate ways, Duncan tells the crew that he's changed his mind. He's not ready to retire yet. Chris returns home and sees Morag again. He starts to tell her about the dangerous event that happened during the dive, but he doesn't say that it happened to him. However, Morag quickly realizes that he's talking about his own experience. She becomes very upset and worried, which is natural after hearing something so scary, but Chris gently tells her that thinking about her, wanting to come back to her, was what gave him the strength to stay alive. The ending text explains that Chris was without oxygen for 29 minutes during the dive, but amazingly, he didn't have any lasting physical or mental damage. Experts are still unable to explain how he survived such a dangerous situation. 3 weeks later, Chris goes back to work with Duncan and Dave, joining them for another diving job. Then there are some real-life video clips of Chris at his wedding, with Duncan attending the ceremony. The final clip shows Chris getting ready to go back to work again. One of the crew members jokingly tells him, "Don't mess it up this time." If you like the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.